Hello and welcome to the Ellenmade Book Club. Today we're talking about Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. Us Against You is the second book in the Beartown series, and so we have of course discussed the first book, Beartown, in a separate video, so I will leave links to that in case you want to head to that first. As this is a book club discussion video, also be aware that there might be spoilers about Us Against You and about Beartown in this video. You're free to continue watching even if you haven't read any of the books, of course, if you want to, but yeah, just be aware that there might be spoilers. I have had some questions on the community tab post thing where I ask for questions, so I will talk through those. You're very welcome to answer them yourself in the comment section, or if you want to make a video yourself and add to the conversation, that would be a lot of fun as well. And yeah, let's just get started with the first question. As always, the first question is from Emily at the Linguist's Library. What made you gravitate toward this particular book? So this is the second book in the series, so of course I wanted to continue the series, but I had already decided that before I read the first book. I enjoyed A Man Called Ove by the same author, and I just had a feeling that I would enjoy the Beartown series as well, and I didn't want to drag it out, as can easily happen with series that you read the first book and then you intend to continue it, and then, you know, a few years pass and you haven't gotten to the second part yet and you can't remember what happened in the first book. And so yeah, I didn't want to have that happen. I wanted to read the whole series in one go. And I also heard from other people who wanted to read Beartown to start with, but also some people that had read Beartown before but hadn't gotten around to reading the second book. And so I just figured, let's just do this, everyone. Read the series together and we can talk about it. And so yeah, so what I like about Backman's writing is the sense of humor and the sense of humanity, I guess, in his books. Both the way he describes things and makes observations about people and behavior and little details that are often mentioned in a very funny way. But he also has a very good understanding, I think, of what motivates people and how people react to different things in life. And yeah, I think he writes very vivid and nuanced characters and good stories. And yeah, they always make me feel things. I cry, I laugh, I get angry, I get frustrated, I have all the feelings. That's why I think his writing is so good. So then I have 6 more questions. I have 3 from Chelsea at Libraries and Lattes and 3 from Reney at Beyond Books. And they're all very good questions, so thank you so much for asking those and participating in the book club and the conversation and all of that. I really appreciate it. Let's get started with the first one from Chelsea. Which book impacted you more, Beartown or Us Against You? I think I touched on this a little bit in my November wrap-up video. Beartown was definitely stronger for me as a book, and also in terms of like the impact it had on me. Partly because the main event happens to a young girl in Beartown, and so it was very easy for me to relate to her in that sense. Just like the impact of that event in itself, I think, is stronger in Beartown, and also the way that people talk about it and blaming the victim and all of that, that just gets me going, makes me so angry. So I had a stronger like emotional reaction to all of that in Beartown, and I was angry at a lot of people in Us Against You as well, but it wasn't in the same, like at the same intensity, I guess. In Us Against You, I would say there are more victims, like more than one victim, and there are more than one main event, but the one that is sort of comparable to the event in Beartown, I would say, is what happens to Benji, that he is involuntarily outed by someone else as a gay person, and that is a horrible thing that I don't wish would happen to anyone. He should not have had to deal with that. He should be able to choose for himself when and to who to tell that. But I also think it's not on the same level as a physical assault, and it is something that I'm assuming he would want to share with people at some point in his life. So it's more a matter of timing and how it's done. Like, it's not a crime to out someone. Maybe it should be, and that's a different topic. But yeah, it's just not on the same level as what happened in Beartown. I also think that the storytelling was stronger in Beartown, and just like the storyline arc, and it was a lot more focused on one story. There were a lot of moving parts in Beartown, but they all seemed to sort of follow along the same story, and they all connected to the main story, whereas in Us Against You, it's a few different events and nothing felt as central to the story as it did in Beartown. So yeah, it was just a little bit more spread out in Us Against You, I felt like. So for that reason as well, I think Beartown was stronger for me. Next question. We have several new characters in this book. Were any of them new favorites for you, or would you have preferred more focus on the characters we already knew from book one? So the new characters that are introduced in Us Against You are Vidar and his older brother Timo. There's the coach Elizabeth and the politician Richard. And we also got a little bit more of Benji's older sisters. I think those are the main additions. I think that my initial feeling, both when I read the book and when I was trying to answer this question, was that like, yeah, I didn't need these new characters. I just wanted the old ones. But I'm not really sure what the story would have looked like without the new characters. I guess the story of Vidar could have been someone else's brother, like someone of the other previous characters, like another player on the team could have had a brother coming out from juvie or something like that. It wouldn't have to be a whole new family. I don't know. It was also interesting to get insight into the group and how all of that worked, and sort of the crime aspect, and like how I talked about in the Beartown discussion video about like using sports as a way to keep kids off the streets and away from crime. So I thought that was an interesting aspect, and I also thought it was interesting to sort of get some insight into the inner workings of the group and their motivations and what they stand for and how they operate. And yeah, just all of that was interesting to me. And I liked how it wasn't this like super criminal gang. It's just regular members of society that also sort of formed a bond in some way. And, you know, there are things you can say about that group and what they do and everything, but they're not like all bad. And so I appreciated the nuance that Backman brought to those characters. The new coach I thought was an interesting addition. I feel like it was implied that she was on the autism spectrum. That's how I read it anyways. And I also appreciated how she was introduced, and like there was this stranger driving around in a car and like watching people, and I was completely convinced that it was a man and probably some kind of criminal or like some kind of, you know, suspicious character. And it turned out to be this new female trainer or coach. And yeah, that was an interesting aspect to the story as well. And having a female hockey coach in a boys team and all of that, like that whole discussion was interesting. I'm not sure how nuanced the depiction of her character was. It felt a little bit stereotypical to me at some points. She could understand very well what motivated the players, and like how she had a very like deep understanding of social things in that sense, but then she had no concept of what was appropriate to do in a locker room with teenage boys. Like, I don't know, it felt a little bit over the top to me at some points. And then we had the politician, Richard, who I also liked the addition of. I didn't like him as a person, but I liked the addition to the story that he provided, highlighting the fact that it's hard to do the right thing when there are people in power who are scheming and manipulating things and controlling things in ways that you're not even aware of and working against you for their own gain. I think it illustrated that point very well, that there are always forces that we are not aware of and that we can't see, like working behind closed doors and things, and impacting our daily lives and what choices we can even make, and that some people just have no issue with manipulating things like that. Were any of them new favorites for you? No, I don't think any of the new characters were favorites for me. I think my favorite is still Benji, but I liked the addition of the new characters to the story because I feel like they were the main storyline, apart from Benji's story. But as characters, they were not new favorite in terms of like I connected with them and felt so much for them and cared for them. I feel like Benji feels like a person, and Richard, the politician, is a character. He's a plot point and like a moving piece on the chessboard. You know, it's not a character that I connect very deeply with. Next question. What themes or topics discussed in this book resonated with you the most? For me, the strongest storyline was Benji's storyline and how he was outed against his will by Anna, and how everyone around him acted when that information came out. I think it was also made very clear how like the jokes that they make in the locker room and on the bus and all of that can impact a person. I'm sure there are situations and people where it would be like, well, don't act differently just because you now know that I'm gay. Like, don't change the jokes and like just act normal and say whatever you would want to say. But I also feel like there were jokes that were made and ways that certain words were used in a very negative way, and they were used as insults, and that can be very harmful and very sort of threatening, especially to a young kid who is figuring things out and getting to know themselves and not really knowing how to tell anyone in that environment about who they are. And then to have that backlash when that information is finally out, and then they feel betrayed and they feel like Benji fooled them all and like was lying to them. And like, how do you expect a person to share that when that's how people talk about gay people, or like being gay, or like using that as a slur and as an insult? You can't really expect someone to be vulnerable and share that information about themselves in that kind of an environment. So that was a part of the story that I appreciated the discussion of. I also thought it was interesting to see how all of these people not necessarily hated Benji because he was gay, or like had an issue with that really. It was more that they felt betrayed and fooled and things like that. And I'm sure that is the case for some people, that, I don't know, it's just not something that they had expected, and so they feel a little bit like the rug was pulled out from under them, which like it really isn't, but you know, for some people they might feel like that, so fine. But I did feel like there was a lack of representation, I guess, of the people who really are not nice about it, and like that don't come around and that don't acknowledge that it's their own issue and their own insecurities and their own hurt feelings and all of that. Some people really do have a problem with other people's sexuality for some reason, and I feel like there weren't a lot of those kinds of characters in this story, so I feel like that was kind of sugar-coated, and maybe it's good to have some positive light on this situation as well, and like not make it a story where coming out is something dangerous and threatening and things like that. But I feel like it wasn't maybe completely realistic in that sense, because some people are just not nice, even if it does come down to their own insecurities and issues. Like, not all people are going to be ready to acknowledge that. I feel like there's a pretty big scale of reactions to someone coming out, like possible reactions, and I feel like we only saw a little piece of that, and you don't have to fill in every kind of reaction that there possibly could be in a story like this, but I just feel like everyone came around eventually and it was fine, kind of thing, when that's not always the case. I also think that people did come around a bit quicker because he is such a good hockey player and they wanted him to win games for them, not necessarily because they realized that they were being rubbish people who couldn't accept other people for who they were. And I mean, not everyone was nice to him, and he did have to go through things, and people did mean things and say mean things and things like that. So it's not like it was completely smooth sailing. It just felt like the solution to everything came pretty easily and put a nice bow on it, and it felt like there was something lacking in the discussion of that whole thing. I did love, though, how Benji's coming out, whether he wanted it or not, had such a positive impact on other kids, and how that was shown by them putting notes in his locker and like thanking him and like saying encouraging things and just letting him know that he's not the only one, but that there are other kids who maybe can't share about who they are to the world yet and don't feel comfortable doing that for very obvious reasons. That felt realistic to me, that people can be role models in that sense and like just not necessarily encourage other kids to come out, but just to feel a little bit better about themselves maybe, and know that they're not alone, and know that someone that they look up to is the same. And so yeah, I just think that's very powerful, and I appreciated that being included in the story. Next question is from Reney, and she asks, should Reney have read this in November instead of that romance book she DNF'd? I love this question. I think it's a little bit of a leading question, and the obvious answer would be yes, you should definitely have read this instead of that romance you DNF'd, but me being me, I'm gonna say no. You should absolutely have followed your own mind and chosen to read whatever you wanted to read at that moment for whatever reason. Would you have enjoyed Us Against You more? Probably. But will you enjoy that even more now that you can compare it to that rubbish romance you read? Also, probably yes. So yeah, no regrets. Next question is, talk about the title of this book. What do you think it refers to? I had thought it was going to be about Beartown versus Hed, the two hockey teams, the two little communities that are neighbors and enemies. And there was a little bit of that, and there is the hockey game that everything, leads up to, just like it was in Beartown. But it wasn't as much of that as I had expected, and not really in the way that I had expected. So I think there are a few different ways to think about the title. So there's the hollow versus the heights, like the poorer part of the community versus the richer people. There's the politicians versus the people. And there was also Anna and Maya, and how it was kind of the two of them against the world. And I also think that kind of mindset in general is kind of applicable to Beartown as a community and like as a small town. It's like this small town against the rest of the world because no one really cares about them and no one thinks that they can do anything as a town or as a hockey team, and they are just, determined to prove everyone wrong about that. It's a very sort of conflict-seeking title, and I feel like that's how it can feel for a lot of people who are in a underdog kind of situation, that everything and everyone is working against them, and you just have to sort of gear up and be prepared to fight in any situation. You're not ever expecting anything to come for free. I think that's how a lot of the members of the group feel as well. Like, no one is coming to rescue them, no one is coming to fix the problems in the community or, you know, punish the people who they think need to be punished. And so they have just found a way to take it upon themselves to solve things. And they also have that mindset of anyone who isn't with us is against us. And so, yeah. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can interpret the title. And yeah, I would love to know if anyone has any other thoughts or see like any other components to that, like us against you, like who are we talking about? Next question is, does this book make you more or less excited for the winners? I think both. I feel like Us Against You was a typical book 2 in a series. Like there's a consistency in terms of writing, and the characters feel the same, the ones that we had met before. But I felt like the plot wasn't as strong, and so that makes me a little bit worried that the third part is just going to be dragging it out and just like staying in the world and with the characters, but like not really doing anything, like having a point. But it also makes me more excited because I feel like this could be that like second book lull. And so there's a strong start with Beartown, and then a little bit of a lull with Us Against You, and then a really strong finish in The Winners as the final part to this series. So I'm a bit apprehensive, I guess, but also hopeful. And yeah, I still want to read the third and final part, even though it is long. Because yeah, I'm just determined to finish this series now while we're in it and before the end of the year and all of that. So yeah, I am looking forward to it, and I'm hopeful that it will be at least a good book. And I'm also curious what's going to happen and like what the main theme is going to be. And so yeah, I think that's it for this video. I would love to hear your thoughts about this book in the comments, or if you want to make a video of your own, that would be fun as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Is it bright again? Cry and laugh and angry and angry.